I pulled out of Fort Myers with 500 hives. Crossed the Tappan Zee Bridge, they were all still alive. From Georgia to Jersey, from pumpkins to trees. I'm the bringer of stingers, I'm still trucking bees. Trucking bees, trucking bees, as nice as you please. Just hauling some pollen like a portable sneeze. Give me white pills and coffee and hand me my keys. And I'll drive all night long just as buzzed as my bees. I can drive through the daylight with no bathroom stops. Those farmers in Maine, they need me for their crops. From berries to almonds, from peppers to peas. A collector of nectar, I'm still trucking bees. Trucking bees, trucking bees, as nice as you please. Just hauling some pollen like a portable sneeze. Give me white pills and coffee and hand me my keys. And I'll drive all night long just as buzzed as my bees.
That's our bee trucking song, which I think we actually neglected to name, but Kyone and I wrote that today because, in fact, that's part of the topic of the show today. We're going to look at a lot of things related to bees. Not our first bee show by any means, but so some of this will be an update, but there's a lot of brand new territory for us to uncover, including what was referenced in that song, which is the number of bees that are simply moved around the country for various reasons. We're going to explain that to you in just a second. We're also going to tell you a little bit about apitherapy. That'll be a little bit later in the show. Apitherapy is the use of various bee products to accomplish medical ends. Probably the thing that you think of, if you think at all about apitherapy or if you've ever heard of it, is bee venom therapy, where the actual venom of the bee is used to stimulate the body in certain ways. So you'll hear about that. You'll hear a little bit, too, about the importance of bees in the Connecticut economy. But and it's sort of interesting because bees, they kind of work two ways. They work as a local economy and part of our local ecosystem, but they're also, just because of the way life is these days, trucked around to a lot of different places. I should also say, as we go along here today, you're welcome to call in. 860-275-7266. 860-275-7266. And we've got some great guests for you today. We're missing one beekeeper right now. If anybody can find John Weil, the owner of Weil Farms in North Stonington, Connecticut, remind him he's supposed to be on the show today, talk about his experiences in the beekeeping business and trucking his bees around. But we do have some great guests in studio and by phone for you. Oh, and I almost forgot. Also later in the show, we're going to talk to a researcher at Cornell who decided to try to figure out, using his own body, what's the worst place to get stung. And he did it very systematically. We'll explain that to you. It's the kind of research not very many people would do. Let me tell you who's here in studio right now. In just a minute or two, you'll meet Alan Lorenzo. He's a traveling bee venom therapist who runs Bee Well Therapy. And he's a member of the American Apitherapy Society. Also in studio is Al Avitabile. He is an emeritus professor of ecology and evolutionary biology at UConn's Waterbury campus, a researcher and a beekeeper, past president of the Connecticut Beekeepers Association. And on the phone in just a second, we'll talk to Raleigh Hannon, the owner of Hannon Honey, which provides pollination services to orchards and vegetable farms, produces wildflower honey, and raises queens. Queen bees, that is. All right, so Al Avitabile, I'm going to go to you first. You heard that incredibly stirring song. You were moved close to tears, I could tell. But this is a reality, right? I mean, bees don't sit on somebody's farm these days. Connecticut bees get trucked all over the place, right?
Connecticut bees and bees throughout the country. Actually, right now, there are approximately 2,400,000 colonies, and two-thirds of them are trucked across the country every year.
And why is that necessary? In other words, we think of farms, and farms have bees, and the bees should be right there. Why aren't there enough bees right there in Georgia or right there in California for the almond crop?
There aren't enough. For instance, the almond crop, the almond orchards cover 760,000 acres, and there's no way you can have bees covering that area. In addition, once the almonds are finished blooming, there's nothing else, no other forage for the bees. So the bees literally are trucked in, stay there about a month, and trucked back out. So and then with monoagriculture, you have huge tracts of land with only, let's say, soybeans, and the only way they can get pollinated is to bring the bees into these tracts of land.
Okay, we want to know more about that. Raleigh Hannon, as I said, joining us from Hannon Honey, which provides pollination services to orchards and vegetable farms. So, Raleigh Hannon, how do the bees feel about this? I mean, do bees just want to sit right where they are? Is there a way to tell whether or not this is sort of an acceptable life for them, getting up on trucks and going different places?
They don't usually know. I mean, yeah, they do know that, but they don't. I mean, they get upset, but they don't. They're not really mad. I mean, it's the way of life. I mean, I worked for migratory. I've done this route across the country, and I actually just brought my semi-load of bees up out of South Carolina on the Georgia border, actually last Wednesday. So it is what it is. You put them on the truck in the evening when they're all back in the hive, and you drive for a few hours, catch some sleep, and then you drive all day. So just to keep the air over the bees and keep them cool.
Yeah, I thought I read that somewhere. I just want to. Can we just pause on that one for a second? Because I in some of the reading I did for the show, I thought I did read that really, in some cases, you almost can't stop during the day, right?
Yeah, you can't stop unless if it's raining or cool. Like if it's like 50 degrees outside, they'll hang in the hives. But if you have a breakdown, there's two people you call when you break a truck down. First is the fire department, and second is the tow truck. The first one is the fire department because you want to see if they can hose the load down, because the bees create so much heat that people don't realize that they'll throw so much heat off the beehives that if you don't cool them down, the tractor trailer can get so hot that you'll actually see wax melting and coming out of the beehives.
Wow, yeah, I hadn't even thought about it that way. And so does that mean for the trucker, for the person who's doing this, I mean, you almost can't stop to go to the bathroom during the day? I mean, can you stop at all?
You got a few minutes. You got to make your stops quickly. When I brought mine up, we were able to stop, check the straps, check the tarps, and then you basically keep rolling. I mean, because if it's 80 degrees outside and you're rolling at 65, 70 miles an hour, which is down south speed limit, you got all that air coming over the bees, which usually is cool. So you actually cools them down. So you're not going to do extended periods. If you got 15-minute stop, 20-minute stop, then hop back in the truck. But a lot of people don't like it when you stop either, because there's always bees that find a hole in the net and sneak out.
Raleigh, just hang on for a second. Al Avatabile, what I'm hearing here, too, is a bee farmer who has a whole set of expertise that probably didn't exist 50, 75 years ago, right? I mean, the whole idea of moving bees around is a relatively modern concept.
I would agree, primarily because agriculture was much more diverse and there were smaller farms, and monoagriculture did not exist to the extent it does today.
And so, Raleigh, give us a little bit more sense. One thing that does happen occasionally, and it always makes the news, is somebody tips over on the Tappan Zee Bridge or something like that, and they've got, I assume, in some cases, millions of bees get out. I assume that's a relatively rare occurrence.
Yeah, for how many that get trucked, I mean, you always hear about one truck that flips over in a year, and there's about 440 hives on a semi-load. And when they're running the bees for pollination, they're running between 40,000 and 60,000 hives in bees in a hive. So you start doing some numbers real quick, and there's a lot of bees on that. And the amount of truckloads that get moved through the country, which most people don't realize, but Connecticut, everybody drives through Connecticut to go to Maine.
Right.
There's 60,000 hives of bees that are needed for pollination of blueberries in Maine. And they all have to drive through Connecticut. And at 440 hives on a load, you're talking a lot of semi-loads that sneak through Connecticut that we haven't had a problem, which is good. I mean, you always hear about one load a year, but there's so many hives that are moved that it's a minuscule of what a load, what happens.
Are there rules? Are there? I mean, I don't know. Do you have to pass certain inspections, or
To actually ship bees interstate, you have to have your health certificates. They come in and look for diseases in your hives, or diseases that are transferable from beehives to beehives. So they don't want, say, my bees bringing diseases down to South Carolina where other people are and spreading that disease. So it's they look at it and then they give you a health certificate, and then usually the paperwork goes ahead of before you go in, or you carry it with you, and then they inspect them when you. Some states do inspect once you hit the ground, or some usually wait a week. Usually, on certain crops, they also inspect for quality of the beehive. So when they're going through the quality look, they're also looking for diseases as well.
Mm-hmm. Al Avitabile, one question that I have too is, if we go back 75 years to more diverse farming culture, smaller farms, etc., you have bees therefore living through a pretty typical season, whatever season is whatever set of seasons are indigenous to the place where they live. Now you've got bees kind of hitting peak pollen time, sort of basically chasing the farming seasons around. Does that change the biology of the bee, or is the bee just wired to pollinate anytime you give it a chance?
Yes, I think the bee is wired to pollinate because the pollen is the protein for the honeybee. So like us, the two requirements are carbohydrates and proteins. And so as soon as you set a hive down, get it off a semi, open it up so the bees can fly, they immediately move towards flowering plants to get the pollen, which is the protein, and the nectar, which is the carbohydrate.
Also joining us now, as I promised before, John Weil's joining us. He's owner-operator of Weil Farms in North Stonington, also in the beekeeping business for a long time, 31 years, pollinating fruits and vegetables in Connecticut, New York, and Florida. So, John Weil, first of all, how much of the year do you, as a beekeeper, as a pollinator, spend on the road?
Well, we're kind of in a strange situation, Colin. We started in New England, we started in Connecticut, and about 20 years ago, we started to see such great bee losses. We knew we had to do something, so we decided to set up an operation in Florida where we could send our bees. I used to say, send our bees on vacation for the winter in Florida, and they would summer in the spring and summer in Connecticut. And so we basically do one large move or several large moves just once or twice a year, and then we get them into New York and Connecticut, and we do our pollination, and then they're brought back to Florida.
And when you say you were seeing bee losses, you're not talking about colony collapse disorder, right? You're talking about winter damage to bees?
Winter damage, tracheal and varroa mite infections that were spreading from state to state, and even though there was quarantines put on those bees, they still managed to, get through all the states. And so it was. I find that the mites provide a weakness to the hives because you never can really. You always end up with 1% to 3% mite, even if you treat for it. And so it weakened the bees. And since bees aren't normally from America, even. They were all brought in. It was always risky in New England to do beekeeping, and then once bees became weakened by the mites, it made it that much harder to do beekeeping in New England.
Hey, Raleigh Hannon, one question I sort of have, too, is as you're moving bees around and you're moving them into different agricultural areas, into different farming areas, is this something you do in close coordination and collaboration with the farmers, or do the farmers just sort of stand back and get out of your way and let your bees do what they have to do?
No, I do. It's this time of year, we're on the phone a lot talking to when they're ready to bring them in after they get their orchards. And you bring them in right when they're like 5% bloom, so that they're, something's open, and then we drop the bees in real quick, and then it's like and then they orchestrate when you're pulling them out. So it's pretty. And some will go around with me, show me where they want them. Some guys will actually I'll set the bees in their parking lot, and they take them out with their tractors or machines like that. All my bees are on pallets. So I can load and unload really quick. Last year I did probably 80% of the Connecticut apples and I basically moved everything in and out moved everything into the orchards within a week.
By the way, as we go along here, if you have questions, the number 860-275-7266, 860-275-7266. So Al Avitabile, obviously, well, first of all, how's Connecticut's overall bee population? Are we up or are we down?
We are up. Basically, amazingly enough, the interest in honeybees has reached all-time highs. The Connecticut Beekeepers Association had a beekeeping school for beginners in January. 150 people showed up for the school. I think 10 years ago, if you had 10, that would be pretty remarkable. There are approximately 5,800 hives in Connecticut and 760 beekeepers. And you might be amazed to know most registered beekeepers are from Greenwich, Connecticut. The highest numbers are in Fairfield County.
On the other hand, okay, that's how many beekeepers there are. That's how the beekeeping field is doing. How are the bees themselves doing in Connecticut?
Actually, fairly okay. Given this rough winter, I'm amazed that I look at hives at different other beekeepers, and they have come through relatively well.
Let me just ask the guys on the phone about this, too. I'll start with you, John Weil. How do you think the overall health of Connecticut bees is these days?
Well, I have heard some encouraging things in Connecticut, but I've got to say that, I see most of people that I see in the beekeeping business in Connecticut are still reporting, at least 20 to 30% winter losses.
And once again, that's not the same thing as CCD, as colony collapse disorder. That's more sort of kind of bee breakage, the normal rate of bee breakage.
Well, I personally think it's a combination of new fungicides, insecticides, the bee problems that we've been having, the mites, and the weather. And now we're starting to see that climate change, at least in Florida, is going to make a huge difference, we think, in beekeeping.
And Raleigh, how about you? Are you seeing the same things that John Weil's talking about?
Yeah, I think you got to remember that Connecticut, we're a small state, not really ag important when you consider the national scope of like Maine blueberries, almonds, Florida citrus. Now, most of the beekeepers in Connecticut, they're hobbyists. They have one to five hives in their backyard. There's a handful of us that have more, that are either sideline or, sideline beekeepers. I wouldn't consider anybody in Connecticut a really commercial beekeeper that make a full-time living strictly from the bees. Somebody is usually working off the family farm for insurance or money-wise. So when you bring that, there's a lot of backyard beekeepers that, or hobbyists that, they do a lot of contribute, to the ag industry or to their gardens and stuff like that. And that's kind of hard when you start dealing with commercial versus hobbyists, how they're managed. For like hobbyists, they, sometimes they have an endless supply of money, what they can put into a beehive, whereas on the commercial side, you can only feed them so much, and then you basically got to draw the line. Is it going to make it or is it going to die? And, we can put more bees in it later. So it's a fine line to deal with that.
All right, we're talking about bees. Our number is 860-275-7266. That's 860-275-7266. In just a second, we're going to take a break. So, but before we leave off the opening part of our conversation and maybe even explore a little bit more the distinction that Raleigh was just making. So, John, before you joined us, Raleigh Hannon was talking a little bit about sort of some of the things you have to learn about transporting bees, and I mean, telling us some pretty hair-raising stuff about just how hot the load gets when you're transporting bees. Maybe you want to share with us also a little bit about the learning curve of trucking and hauling bees. What were the things that you had to learn transporting this kind of unusual load around the country?
Well, I'll tell you, unfortunately, I started this 31 years ago, and I sort of learned by trial and error. You try to get information, but this is a kind of a business. The bees tend to be different in different states, from northern states to southern states. And so I sort of learned by trial and error, and we have recently come up with a new way to transport our bees. It's much more expensive, but we are able to deal with the heat. And I'm sorry I missed the beginning of this, but our phones didn't get hooked up for some reason. But when you start to stack, the bees are palletized and then stacked in tractor-trailer trucks. And when you start to do that, the hive temperature inside the hive gets extremely high. And that has caused a lot of problems in moving bees long distances. We've come up with a new solution to this problem. It's a little more expensive, but it really works well. And what we're starting to do now is put the bees in refrigerated trucks. And so we'll put them in at night, and we'll put them in the refrigerated trucks, and we'll begin to bring down the temperature slowly. Hello?
Yep.
Slowly until we get it down to about 48 degrees Fahrenheit. And once we get it at that level, the bees...
Oh, and you got somebody else trying to call you right now. All right.
I'm sorry.
Actually, you know what? Hang on to that thought for a second, John. We'll get right back to you maybe when you clear up that call. Let me just grab a call from Steve. Here's Steve on a cell phone. Hi, Steve.
Hey, hi. How are you doing today? Thank you very much.
Thanks for calling. What's on your mind?
Yeah, well, my question is, I'm just a little curious about, do the bees have an opportunity? Does it disturb them and the queen when they're moving around? Do you only move certain hives because are they constantly, the queen laying eggs? Are they able to, carry on with that part of their life?
Okay, Raleigh, you might be able to answer that whole question. Sort of the breeding pattern, the breeding cycle of the bees. How much do you have to accommodate that as you move them?
Usually in the early spring, when I was, I'll raise queens and introduce them into the hive, and then usually 7 to 12 days after they go out on their mating flights. Then after they mate, they start laying eggs. But usually they don't. The queen does not leave unless she swarms. Okay, so she's usually in the hive working. Even when they're on the truck, they'll work. There's honey, pollen, everything available for them. They might slow down for a day, just or two, maybe not lay as much, but she's usually continuing laying even on the truck. And you lose a few bees on it, but on a semi-load, some people use refrigerated, but not too many because they create so much heat. Most everybody in the country nets them, and when you net them, you don't put a screen in the entrance. So the bees, if they do get warm, they can come out of the hive and cool themselves. Okay. And with that's just a natural function of a beehive, is to come out up front and they can fan the air through them. And then the way that we have on our pallets is there's plenty of airflow, so they can come out and get fresh air into the hive.
So, not unlike what anybody else would do. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah. You do lose a few on the truck. It's the nature of the beast, I think. You'll do have some dead some dead bees, but pretty much the hives are intact and they're ready to come off. And I've seen them putting bees on the ground in an orchard. I've seen within a half an hour of them actually bringing pollen back to the hives.
They work fast. Raleigh, I'm going to put you on hold for just a second. We're going to go to a break in just a second. Al Avitabile, one of the questions I guess a lot of people have is in terms of trucking bees around the country, obviously what you've got are colonies coming into contact with one another. Michael Pollan, in writing about the pollinization process in California with the almond crops, described it at one point as an enormous bee brothel. You've got all kinds of bees meeting up with other bees. Does science know yet whether there's a risk to the bees simply posed by having so many bees from so many different places in proximity with one another?
Well, I guess a risk is when they put these hives into, let's say, the almond orchards, there's some disorientation. There's no question as they come out for the first time after they've been unloaded, and there is a possibility of drifting does take place. And if you have some hives that are carrying an excess load of varroa mites, for instance, they could drift in a hive that's fairly clean, and there is going to be infection and spreading of diseases.
But once again, this is sort of the nature of how agriculture works these days, right?
Exactly.
All right. So we're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, as I say, we'll take your phone calls. We want to leave a lot of time to talk to Alan Lorenzo about apitherapy, too. So that's coming up. Also, where's the worst place to get stung? You can probably imagine that, but...
There I couch when owls do cry, when owls do cry, when owls do cry. On a bat's back I do fly.
And we're back. We're just talking here in the studio about where the worst place to get stung is. Al has his own theory about this. All right, we're happy to hear from you, too, 860-275-7266. Love to talk to you about bees. Whatever question you have about bees. At this point, we have so many guests. Somebody will absolutely know the answer. We're going to go back now to talk a little bit more beekeeping and also take some of your calls here with Raleigh Hannon and John Weil. They're both big-time beekeepers. So, John Weil, I'm going to start with you. You're talking about how just in the winter there's a loss of bees, what with one thing or another. So that raises the question, I assume when you lose bees, you need more bees. So where do beekeepers get more bees from?
Well, there are a number of ways to do that. The bigger beekeepers grow their own. And so because we want stability of queens and we want stability of stock, so we will grow our own queens. And if you bring them to a southern climate, you can split the hive, taking one hive and making one strong hive and making it into two hives by adding new queens.
Actually, what I'm going to do here is pop Raleigh back on hold for a second and take a call or two. Here's Nancy in Westbrook. Hi, Nancy. You're on the air.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I just had a question. I've just moved from northwestern New Jersey, Morris County, New Jersey, to Westbrook on the shoreline of Connecticut, and I brought my one hive with me. They overwintered in New Jersey, but they've just been brought up here. And I'm just wondering if there's anything in particular that I should know about beekeeping in Connecticut that's very different from beekeeping in New Jersey.
Well, first of all, the Connecticut bees are less friendly than anywhere else, just like the people. They don't say hello. It's all that kind of stuff. So I'm sure all of our guests have answers to that. But, John, I'll start with you. What does she need to know about Connecticut?
Nothing really. Actually, I find that on the shoreline is some of the best beekeeping because for some reason when bees are near salt water, they tend not to have as much trouble with mites, especially the varroa mites. So she might be a little better off. In New Jersey, there's tremendous blueberry pollination, and there's often a drift of various sprays. So she's going to have a lot less trouble with that, I think, where she's living in Connecticut.
Raleigh, any other advice for a Connecticut beekeeper, a transplanted from New Jersey Connecticut beekeeper?
Just get them registered. It's not called a bee inspector for the state. It's not you don't have to pay to register. Just get her forms out, and that'll also help if anybody's spraying in the area. They'll notify her so she doesn't get sprayed.
All right. That's great advice as well. Al Avitabile, I know one thing that a lot of people want to do is help out. They read about colony collapse disorder, and they read about just the sheer importance of the bees to the ecosystem of Connecticut, to the economy of Connecticut, or wherever they live. And most people probably aren't ready to become beekeepers to undertake something that massive. But is there something the average person can do to make life better for bees?
Yes, one in particular, right at this time of the year, dandelions are in bloom all across Connecticut. And I plead with people, there's nothing wrong with having dandelions on your lawn. Leave them there. They're an important source of nectar and pollen for bees early in spring. When the flower is gone, you would never know they're on your lawn. So killing dandelions is not a good thing. If you want to help the ecosystem and the honeybee, let your dandelions bloom and grow on your lawn.
It's probably everything that we do to our lawns in pursuit of some completely artificial aesthetic ideal is antithetical to what the bee needs, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, they want clover, they want weeds, basically. They want things that flower.
Yeah, anything in flower.
All right, so we're talking about bees. I don't want to spend too much time in this segment because I want to leave a lot of time for apitherapy and bee stings too. But let me grab one more call here. I'm just carefully trying to do this without knocking anybody off the line. Here's Barry in Ridgefield. Hi, Barry.
Hi, how are you?
Just fine.
Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
My question is, I have been a beekeeper and I'm an apitherapist. I knew Charlie Mraz. I know Ed Weiss, Ross Conrad, and anyway, I've had conversations wondering about how sugar feeding may adversely affect the immune system of the bees, along with changing the size or enlarging the foundation to create larger bees and so on and so forth.
So I don't even know about sugar feeding. Who can explain that to me?
Well,
Al will.
Sure, I'll be happy to. Yes, in the fall, if you think there's not enough honey in the hive, you can feed your bees sugar water mix, 2 sugars to 1 water. In the spring, to stimulate brood rearing, you can feed 2 parts water, 1 part sugar, and it is sucrose. But the bees will break it down to fructose and glucose, and when they pick up nectar from flowers, they're picking up sucrose as well. So I don't think anyone has shown that feeding them sucrose diluted in water is harmful to them.
I mean, they don't get hyperactive. They can't sit still anymore or anything like that. It's,
no, they keep doing what they do.
I guess bees are kind of basically hyperactive. Barry, does that answer your question?
Basically, it does. But I know we've been tampering with with the size of the foundation to create larger bees over the years. Ross Conrad is a pretty serious green beekeeper up in Vermont, and he's trying to do some things along those lines to encourage the health of the original bees themselves.
I think Al's got something about that, too.
Yeah. On cell size, at least some of the scientific studies that have already been made, it indicates if you go to small cell size, let the bees eventually build their own comb, and it will be a reduced size. The varroa mite counts still seem to remain the same.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break here, and then we're going to come back. We're going to talk to you about bees and your body. First of all, which places the bees can hurt the most, and then all the ways that the bees can help. Alan Lorenzo, a traveling bee venom therapist and apitherapist, is going to talk a little bit more about that.
I don't understand why I have to let the bee sting me for venom therapy. Why can't I just take the venom in frozen daiquiri form? Today's show was produced by Jane Ashley, Betsy Kaplan, and me. Greg Hill tweets for us at WNPR Colin, and Katie Tolarski is our executive producer. The part of Bill Curry was played by Jeff Goldblum. For show pages, articles, and photos of the Faith Middleton Show staff in their adult bumblebee costumes, visit WNPR.org. On tomorrow's show, in a world of Tony Soprano and Frank Underwood, have we forgotten what a villain is? And now, back to Colin.
All right, we're back. We're going to talk about bees in your body, and we're going to talk a lot with Alan Lorenzo about apitherapy. But first, as part of his ongoing quest to be a challenger of the unknown, former Colin McEnroe show producer Patrick Scahill went out to visit with hive keepers, and guess what happened to him? Let's hear it.
Up the nose is the worst single place to be stung. There is no place worse than up the nose, and I mean no place. Pick an area on the body, let your mind go wild. Up the nose is still the worst.
That's Andrew Cote.
We're about done here.
And that's him getting stung up the nose.
All right. I thought we had Patrick getting stung, too. But we don't hear the sound of Patrick getting stung. I actually have that as a ringtone on my phone now. It's just Patrick getting stung. All right. So before we talk about all the good things that bees can do for you, we should briefly touch upon the bad thing that they can do to you, which is sting you, which also can be a good thing. But Michael Smith is a graduate student at Cornell University studying neurobiology and behavior. And Michael Smith, you really wanted to know, you must have really wanted to know this. You really wanted to know, where does it hurt the most? And there is a scale for rating pain, right?
Yes, there is. And I mean, as a scientist, as a researcher, if something's not known, that's at the top of your list. You gotta figure those things out. So you mentioned there is a scale for rating the painfulness of stings, and that's there's the Schmidt sting pain index, and that was used for rating the painfulness of different types of insect stings. So, for example, how does a wasp compare to a honeybee or a different type of ant or a bullet ant? And that was on a 0 to 4 scale. What I was interested in, though, is if you take the single honeybee and you were to apply a standardized sting over the whole body, which would be the most painful place on the body? And that was done on a 1 to 10 scale, although the lowest score was a 2.3 and the highest score was a 9.0.
All right. So, and the research subject in this was you, right? You just sort of studied it on yourself?
Yes, I did. Who's better to tell me how painful something is than myself?
Well, it works for me. I mean, as long as it's not me, I think it's fine that it can be you. So you did this in how many different body locations?
So there were 25 different body locations, and I did 3 rounds of the experiment.
And so you, so you got stung 75 times intentionally.
Actually, I got stung more than 75 times. So when it came down to control, you can think, okay, how painful is this sting? I needed something kind of like an internal standard, something to base the painfulness of an experimental sting. So I actually used my forearms as I would give myself a sting on the forearm and tell myself, okay, that's a 5. Now there was a randomizer so that I could actually get a random location. Okay, sting yourself on the calf. And I could rate the painfulness of the sting to the calf relative to the forearm sting. So it was actually, I think, if the math is correct, I think it comes out to 190 stings.
Oh, geez. So it's time to open the envelope and find out the winner. So where's the worst place? Where are the worst places to be stung by a bee?
So the very worst place is the nostril with a 9.0.
Wow.
And if you're looking at your nose, we're not talking about like on the outside of your nose, like where you might have like a piercing.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the inside of the nostril, like the place where a bull would be pierced. Right in there.
So you picked up a bee with some forceps and stuck it up your nostril to find out how much it was going to hurt?
I didn't really have to stick the bee up there. I mean, you can just place her there, and her stinger will go right in there, no problem.
All right. Well, no problem might be the wrong way to put it, actually.
No problem is right, because when you get stung in the nostril, it's a whole body experience. You start sneezing, your tears are just pouring out, you've got mucus coming out of your nose. Your entire body reacts. Your body knows that this is not a good thing. And when you think about it, think of a colony of honeybees. You've got tens of thousands of bees in there, and if they're trying to repel an intruder, and each honeybee only has one shot at packing her punch, she's going to aim for the nose. She's going to aim for your lips. She's going to aim for the eye. She's going to aim for the places that are going to give the most bang for her buck.
I didn't really think of them as sort of thinking this whole thing out that way. Oh, so I sort of hate to ask, but what came in second?
The second place was the upper lip with an 8.7.
All right. Well, so those are good places not to get stung. And then I'm looking at the report here. It says skull, middle toe tip, and upper arm would be the best places to get stung, if there can be such things.
Yeah. So skull, middle toe tip, and upper arm all received a scoring of a 2.3.
So if you can get them to choose, that's what you want them to choose. Michael Smith, first of all, you are the most courageous scientific researcher I think I've ever heard of, and I thank you so much for spending the time with us. But I want to leave a lot of time here for Alan Lorenzo, who's you're telling the happier story of bees. We know that a bee sting hurts, but a lot of people don't understand that bee venom can theoretically, according to the dictates anyway of the world of apitherapy, be of benefit to people. Explain how this works.
Well, basically, bee venom has many properties and has antiviral, it's antibacterial, it's antifungal. It also has neurotransmitters in it, dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine. And being that it has the neurotransmitters in the venom, this allows it to travel over the body. So in a simplified example, if we had an MS person and they had a foot drag problem, you would sting in a lumbar area of the spine. You would sting in a local area where it's bothering them, where the foot drag problem is. And you would sting neurological trigger points along the way that travel through the buttocks and the hips and the thighs and the calves. And with the neurotransmitters, the bee venom has the ability to travel up and down that neural pathway. If it's antiviral and there's a virus causing the MS, that's one way it's going to help. But other ways it's going to help is where the myelin fiber is worn away. The bee venom therapy stimulates an immune system healing response in that neural pathway and allows the myelin fiber to heal over time. It's not going to cure anybody their MS, but it can repair the damage that's been done.
You know, getting ready for the show, I was just reading research, and there is reviewed research on this now being done in at scientific facilities, and it seems to be a lot of research going on in Korea for some reason or other. But this isn't really accepted medical practice, right? There, in terms of sort of what you can get insurance reimbursements for, in terms of what your doctor will tell you is a good thing to do. This is really considered a pretty substantially alternative therapy.
Absolutely, and bee venom therapy is definitely outside the realm of medicine. It's not considered medicine at all.
On the other hand, people do, I assume, seek this out. How first of all, how does the word spread? If in fact my doctor is not going to tell me for my MS, for my arthritis, for whatever it is, boy, you should go find an apitherapist, because really the stuff that I've got is not working that well for you. I assume that doesn't happen. So how do people find you?
Well, pretty much let's look at the way that I found bee venom therapy. I had problems with bursitis and tendonitis and herniated disc, and I'd been seeing orthopedic doctors for several years, and it wasn't helping me either. And eventually I saw a news broadcast on the local Fox News channel out in New York, and it was about bee venom therapy, and I looked it on the internet, found some people in the area, and started learning how to do it, and found it was really medicine's best kept secret. That this can really help people in significant ways.
And so when this happens, I'm trying to picture this. Well, first of all, in order to learn how to do this, you didn't start out as a beekeeper, right? But you had to become effectively a beekeeper. You got to get a bunch of bees.
Not at all. No. You can get bees shipped to you via mail order. There's no need to become a beekeeper. The fact that bees are the easy part. Yeah. The hard part is learning how to actually do it effectively, so it's going to, treat your condition in a meaningful way.
And so effectively doing that means understanding where you want to be stung by the bee, but also I would imagine getting the bee to sting somebody in a specific spot. I'm picturing somehow there's some kind of glass that's cupped over this area, or how do you do that? Tweezers.
Really? And if people are really interested, my website, bewelltherapy.com, has a YouTube video of me stinging my forearm for tendonitis, but it's all controlled with tweezers. You don't have to worry about bees flying all over your home. And it's all done in a very controlled manner.
How did you learn how to do this? Is there an apitherapy school you can go to, or how did you figure out how to do this?
Very eclectically. At first, I learned from a couple of people in the area, Dr. Teo Chevrolet, who was supposed to be on today's show, but I guess he declined. Amber Rose, who also did apitherapy in the New York metropolitan area. And then later on, I went to the AAS and learned more things from Jim Higgins and Donald Downs in the CMAC conferences that they offer. And in pulling all this information together in my own trial and error, I learned it the way I needed to learn it.
I would imagine also when somebody comes to you, another thing that you have to be very careful about. Some people are allergic to bees. Some people don't know how allergic they are to bees. Some people may be suddenly more allergic to bees than they were yesterday, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you deal with that?
They're not going to be more allergic to bees than they were yesterday. Everybody's allergic to bee venom. Okay, it's just that some people are more allergic than others, and that's the reason you get the redness and the swelling and the itching when you get stung by a bee. The people that go into anaphylactic shock today, they can be tested for that in an allergist if they're concerned and never been stung for a bee before. But before I would do bee venom therapy with anybody, we always do a test sting. We have an EpiPen on hand. Even though somebody like myself has been stung by thousands of bees over the last 14 years, it's statistically possible that I could go into anaphylactic shock anytime. Not very likely, but nevertheless I have that EpiPen on hand, because if I didn't, I'd be a goner.
If you have questions about this, our number is 860-275-7266. When we talk about apitherapy, I assume that's not synonymous with bee venom therapy. That apitherapy encompasses a whole range of things that bee-related products and byproducts can do for you.
Well, bee venom therapy is really a subset of apitherapy.
Yeah.
You also have products of the hive like propolis and the bee pollen that was mentioned before, and royal jelly. And all these can be used to treat various health conditions, like bee pollen can help lower cholesterol and blood pressure. Propolis has antiviral and antibacterial properties. It can be used to get rid of the common cold if used early on. Royal jelly can help people with insomnia and mood disorders and a whole range of other issues, including menopause for women and things like that.
Let me grab a call here from, because this comes up all the time, Sharon in Rocky Hill. Hi, Sharon.
Hi.
What's on your mind?
Oh, well, going along with what you're speaking of now, honey is supposed to be beneficial for allergies and other ailments and just for health benefits. But they talk about eating local honey, and I hear about the bees traveling from hive to hive to hive and locations. How close to home should local honey be for you to have local honey?
That's kind of like a myth. Any honey that you pick up around here that's raw and pasteurized can help you with the condition. It doesn't have to come from the beehive around the corner. I have found some different benefits with different parts of the world, propolis that comes from different parts of the world, and honey, so that could make a particular difference. But anything out of North America should really help you with what you need.
Al Avitabile, you're sitting here listening to all this. You sort of study the other end. You study the lives of the bees themselves. Is this something that people on your end, people in ecology and entomology are interested in, or is it does it exist off kind of by itself?
No, well, I think there are many beekeepers, maybe not all of them, that certainly are interested in apitherapy. I just would mention that Alan probably realizes one of the early practitioners was Charles Mraz in Middlebury, Vermont. And just quickly, he had rheumatoid arthritis as a child, and he had read Dr. Beck's book on bee venom therapy, and he went to his bee yard one day just because he was in pain every day, and he just rolled up his pants, got 5 or 6 bees to sting one knee and then the other, and he woke up the next morning and he says, "I'm dreaming," because he was pain-free.
There's sort of like a holy trinity of this. The history of apitherapy that at least I was reading about. The Austrian physician Philip Turk, his book Report about a Peculiar Connection Between Bee Stings and Rheumatism, and then Dr. Beck, the Hungarian scientist whom you mentioned, who moved to America after World War I, and then Charles Mraz. Those are the 3 people that one reads about. I think a lot.
Real pioneers, yeah,
in the history of apitherapy. Obviously, we're almost out of time, Alan Lorenzo. So you mentioned a few things. Is there for example, I read some scientific research about MS and apitherapy. Are there specific conditions that seem to rise to the top in terms of effective apitherapy treatment?
Well, ones that certainly involve rheumatism, neurological disorders, it can help many of that. If you have cancer and it's located close to the surface of the skin, such as skin cancer or breast cancer, and it's first stage, and you sting it with bees, the bee venom can kill the cancer cells. And this is any animal venom can do that. But looking at practicality, you're not going to hold a snake to your breast. So you can use bees. And this has been done. And I've used it to get rid of skin cancer. Donald Downs out in Wellington, Ohio, has used it to get rid of breast cancer in women when it started out as a lump at a golf ball. And after stinging the area for a month, it just went away because the bee venom goes in and it kills the cancer cells. All your other cells regenerate from your own DNA. The cancer has no DNA, so it disappears.
You probably want to do this in conjunction with an actual oncologist / dermatologist, the appropriate medical personnel. Don't just trust the bees to fix you. They may be great, but you probably want to get regular medical treatment as well. Hey, listen, we're out of time here. We especially want to thank Jane Ashley, our intern, who put this show together. We'll be back tomorrow with a show about villains. Do people even understand what a villain is anymore? Thanks for tuning in today.
Chance tonight to make everything all right. Come on and make your flow. Sting me with all your might. Hey, bumblebee, come on and sting me. Bumblebee, come on and get busy with me.
I'm Kyle Wolf. Hey, B, you need a ride? I got plenty of your friends in here already. You have to sting me first? Well, where are you going to sting me? You want to sting me there? Nuh-uh. See ya, B.